It all started 3 months before my wedding day, when I thought my life was finally falling into place. My name is Claire Anderson, and for the first time in years, I felt like the universe was being kind to me. I had a man who loved me deeply, a career that I was proud of, and a family that had supported me through every mistake I ever made. Or at least, that is what I believed back then. Looking back now, I realize that happiness can sometimes be the most dangerous illusion of all. Ryan Walker came into my life on a rainy Thursday afternoon in Seattle. I still remember how soaked I was when I entered the small coffee shop near my office, shaking off my umbrella and trying not to look like a walking disaster. He was sitting at the corner table, typing on his laptop, and when our eyes met, he smiled in that quiet, confident way that made me stop breathing for a second. I ordered my latte, and when the barista called my name, Ryan stood up to hand me my cup, as if fate had choreographed the moment perfectly. He introduced himself, offered me his seat, and by the time the rain had stopped, we had already exchanged numbers. The next few months were a blur of long calls, shared dinners, and late-night confessions. Ryan was everything I had dreamed of. He worked as a civil engineer, loved hiking, and adored his younger sister Lily. He had this gentle way of listening that made me feel like I was finally being seen. Everyone around me noticed the glow on my face, even my best friend Mia, who jokingly said that Ryan looked at me like I was the only person in the world. I laughed then, never realizing how that very love would one day destroy me. When he proposed on a quiet beach in Oregon, I said yes before he even finished the sentence. It was one of those cinematic moments where the wind catches your hair and you believe that forever is real. My parents were thrilled, and the wedding plans began immediately. We booked a beautiful vineyard outside the city, surrounded by green hills and white roses. Everything felt magical, almost too perfect. And maybe that should have been my first warning. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, small things started to change. Ryan became quieter, distracted, lost in thoughts he would never share. When I asked if something was wrong, he brushed it off, saying work was stressful. I wanted to believe him, but sometimes at night I would wake up to find him sitting on the balcony, staring into the dark with a look I could not describe. I convinced myself it was just pre-wedding anxiety, the kind everyone feels when life is about to change forever. Then one morning, I found a letter tucked inside one of his suit pockets while sending it for dry cleaning. It was from someone named Emily. The handwriting was delicate, almost trembling. It said, "I wish I could be there on your big day. Maybe one day she will understand." I froze, reading those words again and again, my mind spinning with questions. When I asked Ryan about it later that night, he laughed nervously and said it was from his cousin who could not attend the wedding. His voice cracked slightly when he said it, but I forced myself to smile and let it go. I told myself I trusted him. Love does that to you, it makes you blind in the name of faith. Mia, my best friend, noticed my unease during one of our last fittings. She asked me if I was sure about Ryan, if I had ever met all his family. I realized then that I had not. I had only met his sister once and his father once briefly over dinner. His mother had passed away years ago, he had told me, and he did not speak much about her. I remember brushing away Mia's doubts, telling her she was overthinking. But the truth is, her words stayed with me, whispering in the back of my mind every time. Ryan avoided a conversation or left the room to take a call. The day before the wedding was calm, almost too calm. The vineyard glowed under the sunset, and everyone was smiling, toasting, and laughing. Ryan seemed distant but affectionate, holding my hand tightly as if afraid to let go. I remember looking at him and feeling a strange pull in my chest, a mix of love and fear, like something inside me already knew that tomorrow would not go as planned. I wish I had asked him then, I wish I had listened to the small voice inside me that whispered something was wrong. But I didn't, because I was in love, and love makes you deaf to your own instincts. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept imagining the moment I would walk down the aisle, the music, the look on Ryan's face. Around 2 a.m., I went outside to breathe the cold air and found Ryan standing near the old oak tree behind the vineyard house. He looked startled to see me, and when I asked what he was doing, he said he needed to clear his mind. I hugged him, told him everything would be fine. He kissed my forehead, held me tightly, and whispered, "You'll be okay, Claire." The way he said it made me shiver, but I didn't understand why. The next morning, the sun rose beautifully over the hills. Guests began to arrive, laughter filled the air, and my heart raced with excitement. I slipped into my wedding dress, the white lace shimmering softly in the light. The photographer clicked pictures, my bridesmaids fussed around me, and Mia gave me a reassuring smile. Everything was ready, or so I thought. At exactly 4 p.m., the ceremony was supposed to begin. The guests were seated, the music started playing, and I stood behind the wooden doors, waiting for my cue. But Ryan was nowhere to be seen. The best man looked pale, whispering something to the coordinator. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The laughter turned into murmurs. Mia squeezed my hand, her eyes wide with confusion. Then the coordinator walked up to me, her face drained of color, and said quietly, "Claire, we can't find him." At first, I laughed, thinking it was some kind of silly prank. But as minutes turned into half an hour, the truth began to sink in. Ryan Walker, my soon-to-be husband, had vanished. And that was how it began, the day the bells never rang, and my world began to unravel. When they told me Ryan was missing, my first instinct was denial. I laughed, shaking my head, telling everyone he was probably just taking a moment alone, maybe nervous, maybe caught in traffic. It was easier to believe that than to face the growing unease crawling up my spine. But as the minutes passed, and the sunlight began to fade into that golden shade of late afternoon, I could feel the atmosphere shifting. The chatter died down, the music stopped, and whispers began to circle through the crowd like slow-moving smoke. The coordinator's face said it all. She kept glancing toward her phone, talking in hushed tones with the best man, and every time she looked at me, her eyes softened with pity. I hated that look. Pity felt like an admission that something irreversible had happened. I turned to Mia, hoping for reassurance, but she looked pale herself, biting her lip as she squeezed my hand. We called his phone. No answer. We called again, and again, until finally it went straight to voicemail. My heart started pounding in my chest, so loud it drowned out the sounds around me. I tried to steady my breathing, but every thought screamed the same question: where was he? Ryan was not the kind of man who disappeared. He was responsible, steady, the kind of person who texted me even if he was going to be 5 minutes late. He had planned every detail of this wedding, from the wine selection to the seating chart. He had been excited, maybe even more than me. The idea of him vanishing felt impossible, unreal, like I had been pushed into a dream I could not wake from. The guests started shifting uncomfortably, their smiles fading into confusion. My father went to speak with the coordinator, his brows drawn tight, his voice low but sharp. My mother tried to comfort me, her hands trembling as she brushed a stray hair from my face. Someone brought me water. I could not drink it. My throat was dry, my stomach churning. An hour passed. Then another. The sky began to change, the once bright vineyard now cast in orange and pink. People started leaving, murmuring polite apologies and awkward condolences, as if a missing groom were something that could be explained away with sympathy. Mia stayed beside me, refusing to let me stand alone. I wanted to scream, to demand someone find him, but there was nowhere to start. By evening, the police had been called. They asked questions. When was the last time I saw him? Had we argued? Did he seem upset? Did he leave a note? I shook my head to every question, my voice hollow, my mind looping through every moment of the past 24 hours. The letter from Emily flashed in my mind, the way he had said I would be okay, the strange look in his eyes under the oak tree. It all started to feel connected, like pieces of a puzzle I did not yet understand. The officers checked his hotel room, his car, even his phone records. His phone had last pinged near the vineyard at around noon, just hours before the ceremony. After that, nothing. It was like he had evaporated into thin air. That night, the vineyard emptied. The lights were dimmed, the flowers left wilting, the cake untouched. I sat alone in my wedding dress inside the small bridal suite, staring at my reflection. My makeup had run, my eyes were red, and my heart felt like a stone. I remember touching the lace of my veil, whispering his name under my breath, half expecting him to walk in and laugh, to tell me it was all a misunderstanding. But the silence that followed was heavy and cruel. Around midnight, Mia convinced me to go back to the city. The drive felt endless, each mile pulling me further into disbelief. My phone kept lighting up with messages from guests, relatives, even reporters who had caught wind of the story. Runaway groom, cold feet, scandal. The words made my skin crawl. It did not feel like that. This was not just cold feet. There was something deeper, darker. When I reached my apartment, I collapsed on the couch, still in my dress, my body shaking uncontrollably. Mia stayed the night, sitting beside me, refusing to sleep. Around 3 in the morning, there was a knock on my door. My heart leapt, thinking it might be him, but it was the police again. They wanted to ask more questions. They had checked security footage from the vineyard entrance. Ryan's car had left the property at 2 p.m., 2 hours before the ceremony. The footage showed him alone, wearing his tuxedo, his expression unreadable. He did not look panicked, just calm, distant. The car drove out of frame, and that was the last anyone saw of him. The police said it could be voluntary disappearance, that maybe he had second thoughts. But I knew Ryan. He was not the type to vanish without a word. Something was wrong. I could feel it in my bones. For the next few days, my life became a blur of interviews, missing posters, and endless questions. News outlets picked up the story, calling it the vanishing groom mystery. Strangers speculated online, some claiming they saw someone matching his description in nearby towns, others saying it was staged. I stopped reading. Every headline felt like a wound. One morning, 3 days after the wedding, I received an envelope in the mail. There was no return address. Inside was a small photograph. It was me and Ryan, taken weeks before the wedding, sitting by the lake. On the back, in the same delicate handwriting as the letter I had found earlier, were the words, "He wanted to tell you, but he couldn't." I felt the blood drain from my face. I sat there holding the photo, my hands trembling, my heart beating so fast it hurt. That handwriting, those words, that name, Emily. She was real. She had known him. She had known what happened. From that moment, I stopped waiting for Ryan to come back on his own. I needed answers. I needed the truth. Mia tried to stop me, telling me to let the police handle it, but I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, that final look in his eyes under the oak tree. I needed to know who Emily was, and what secret he had taken with him when he vanished. So I started digging, through his things, his files, his old photos. I searched everything, and what I found was the first crack in the picture-perfect life I thought I had. Because Ryan Walker, the man I was supposed to marry, was not who he said he was. After the photograph arrived, I stopped pretending that time or luck would solve anything. I spent that entire night sitting on the floor surrounded by Ryan's things, the scent of his cologne still faint on his shirts, the silence of the apartment thick like fog. Every memory of him began to twist into a question. I had trusted this man completely, yet now every word he had ever said echoed with doubt. The photo from Emily was more than just a message, it was an invitation to dig, and I knew deep down that once I started, I might never be able to stop. The next morning I opened his old laptop, the one he always kept locked with a password. He had once joked that his work files were confidential and I never questioned it. I stared at the screen for a long time, typing every password I could think of, until one finally worked. It was my name, Claire. My chest tightened as the desktop loaded, revealing a folder named Projects. Inside, most files were what I expected, drawings, contracts, maps, but one folder caught my eye. It was titled, E. Just a single letter. When I opened it, I found a series of photographs. They weren't recent, and they weren't of me. The first image was of a woman standing beside a red car, smiling, her long brown hair covering one side of her face. The second showed her sitting on a park bench, her head resting on Ryan's shoulder. My stomach turned. The third photo was the two of them holding hands, and on her finger, I saw a ring almost identical to mine. My hands began to shake. I scrolled through more pictures, dozens of them, showing birthdays, dinners, vacations. Then I found a document named Emily. It was a letter, half written, the last line unfinished. It read, "I'm sorry for everything, I never meant for any of this to happen, and I wish you could forgive me." That was when it hit me. Emily wasn't just someone from his past, she was someone he still loved, or someone he couldn't let go of. I didn't know if she was alive, or if something had happened between them, but I knew she held the key to why he disappeared. I called Mia immediately. She came over without hesitation, bringing coffee and that steady voice of reason she always carried. I showed her the photos, the letter, everything. She didn't say much at first, just stared at the screen with wide eyes. Then she looked at me and said softly, "Claire, we need to find her." It sounded insane. We barely knew who Emily was, or where to start. But there was one clue. The photograph that had arrived in the mail had a faint stamp on the corner, from a small town called Maple Hollow, 2 hours away. It was a quiet place surrounded by forests, one of those towns where everyone knew everyone. We drove there that afternoon. The road was empty, lined with endless stretches of pine trees. I kept glancing at my phone, checking for messages that would never come. My wedding ring sat heavy on my hand, a reminder of a promise that had turned to dust. When we reached Maple Hollow, the air felt different, quieter, older, like time moved slower there. We stopped at a small diner near the main road. The waitress, a woman in her 50s, smiled politely as we ordered coffee. I asked if she knew anyone named Emily who might have lived nearby. The moment I said the name, her expression changed. She hesitated, then leaned closer. "Emily Rogers," she said slowly. "She used to live out near the lake, but that was years ago." I asked if she still lived there. The woman shook her head. "No honey, Emily passed away about 2 years back. Car accident. Such a sweet girl, it was all over town when it happened." The world seemed to tilt. My vision blurred, and I gripped the edge of the table to keep myself steady. Emily was dead, yet someone, somewhere, had sent me that photograph days ago. Someone who wanted me to believe she was alive, or someone who wanted me to know about her death. Mia reached out, squeezing my arm gently, whispering that we should go. But I couldn't leave. I needed to see her house, to understand what connection she had with Ryan. The waitress gave us directions, a small road leading to a cabin near the edge of the lake. The drive there was silent. The lake shimmered under the pale afternoon light, surrounded by thick woods. The cabin stood half hidden behind tall trees, its paint peeling, its porch covered in fallen leaves. It looked abandoned. I stepped out of the car, my shoes crunching over gravel, my heart pounding in my chest. The front door was unlocked. I hesitated, then pushed it open. The air inside was stale, filled with dust and the faint smell of old wood. A few pieces of furniture remained, covered with sheets. On the wall above the fireplace hung a photograph. It was Ryan and Emily, smiling, holding hands, standing in front of that very cabin. Mia whispered my name, her voice trembling. On the table near the window lay an envelope, yellowed with age. It had my name on it. My full name, written in Ryan's handwriting. I picked it up, my fingers cold and numb. Inside was a letter, dated 2 days before the wedding. It said, "Claire, by the time you read this, I might already be gone." I tried to build a new life, but the past never lets go. Emily's death wasn't an accident. And I can't pretend anymore. The letter ended there, unfinished, the ink smeared as if written in haste. I stared at the words again and again, my mind unable to process them. Emily's death wasn't an accident. We left the cabin before dark, driving back in silence, my thoughts spinning like storm clouds. If Emily's death wasn't an accident, then who was responsible? And what did Ryan mean by he couldn't pretend anymore? That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, staring out at the empty street, replaying everything I had learned. Ryan had loved Emily, she had died 2 years ago, and he had hidden that from me. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that someone out there knew everything, and they were watching me. When I checked my mailbox the next morning, there was another envelope. No name, no stamp. Inside was a small note. It read, "Stop looking for him." I froze, my heart racing, the paper trembling in my hands. Someone knew I was searching. Someone didn't want me to find the truth. But it was too late. I was already in too deep. I didn't sleep that night. My mind was running in circles trying to piece together what was happening. Every sound outside the window made me jump. The house felt different, almost hostile. I wanted to believe it was just the stress getting to me, but deep down I knew something wasn't right. When I finally did drift into a half-sleep, I woke up to the sound of footsteps on the porch. Slow, deliberate, like someone didn't want to wake the others. I got up, heart racing. Through the window I saw a shadow, tall and motionless. I blinked and it was gone. When I opened the door, the porch was empty, but there was something on the step, a small white flower. The same kind that was on my wedding bouquet. My heart stopped. It couldn't be coincidence. It was November and those flowers didn't grow around here. I picked it up, and my fingers trembled. It was fresh, as if someone had just placed it there. The next morning I drove to the police station again. Officer Daniels looked tired when he saw me walk in. He probably thought I was losing my mind. But when I placed the flower on his desk, his expression changed. He leaned forward and examined it. "Where did you get this?" he asked quietly. When I told him, he called another officer over. They exchanged a look that made my stomach drop. Apparently, the same kind of flower had been found near another missing persons case from 2 years ago. A woman named Claire. I had never heard of her, but the similarity was chilling. She was last seen on her wedding day too. Daniel showed me her photo and for a moment I couldn't breathe. She looked eerily similar to me. Same hair color, same eyes, even the same kind of smile. I went home and sat in my car for almost an hour before I could bring myself to go inside. I felt like I was being watched. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, to get out of that town. But I couldn't. I needed to know what happened to Claire, and maybe in finding out her truth, I'd uncover mine. That night I started digging through old newspaper archives online. I found a few small articles about Claire's disappearance. Nothing major, just a few lines saying she had gone missing before the ceremony. The strange thing was that her fiancé had vanished a week later. No trace of him either. I decided to contact her family. Her younger sister agreed to meet me at a small diner on the edge of town. She looked at me like she'd seen a ghost. "You look just like her," she whispered. When I asked what happened, she hesitated. Claire was scared the week before her wedding. She told me someone was following her. She thought she saw a man standing outside her window at night. We told her it was just nerves. And then she was gone. The sister handed me something, a small locket that had belonged to Claire. She said if anything ever happened to her, to give this to someone who would understand. Inside the locket was a folded piece of paper with 2 words written in shaky handwriting, "The lake." The lake was on the outskirts of town. The same one where Mark and I had gone for a picnic a week before the wedding. The same one where he had told me he wanted to build a house someday. My chest felt tight. I drove there the next morning. The air was cold and still. Mist hung over the water like a ghost. Near the edge of the lake, I noticed something glinting under the mud. I crouched down and pulled out a small silver hairpin. It wasn't mine. I had never seen it before, but it looked old, tarnished by time. Then I found another one, and another. There were at least 5 scattered around the same spot. Someone had been here before. Someone had buried something. When I turned around, I saw movement across the water. A man, standing still, half hidden by the trees. My breath caught in my throat. He was too far to recognize, but the shape of his shoulders, the way he stood, it looked like Mark. I called out his name but there was no response. He didn't move, just kept watching. Then, slowly, he turned and walked back into the woods. I stood there shaking, torn between chasing him and running in the opposite direction. I chose to run. When I reached my car, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I answered without thinking. A distorted voice said, "You shouldn't have gone to the lake." Then the line went dead. My hands were trembling as I drove away. That voice wasn't Mark's. It was lower, colder, almost mechanical. I tried to call Daniels but the signal kept cutting out. When I finally got through, I told him everything. He promised to send a team to search the area. But when they went the next morning, there was nothing. No hairpins, no footprints, no sign that anyone had been there at all. I began to doubt myself. Maybe I was losing my grip on reality. Maybe grief was playing tricks on me. But that night, when I got home, I found a muddy footprint at my door. And next to it, another white flower. That was when I realized something horrifying. Whoever had taken Claire might have taken Mark, too, and now, they were coming for me. The next morning I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing again. Another unknown number. I didn't answer this time. I just sat there staring at it until it stopped ringing. My heart felt like it was caught in a vice. I could still hear the distorted voice from the night before echoing in my head. "You shouldn't have gone to the lake." I didn't tell anyone where I was going but I drove back to the lake. I parked my car on the far side, where the woods were thicker, and started walking along the edge. The air smelled of damp leaves and decay. Every crunch beneath my shoes made me jump. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I found the same spot where I had seen the man standing. The ground was disturbed, like someone had dug there recently. I knelt down and brushed away the dirt with my hands until I hit something hard. It was a small wooden box. The latch was rusted, and my fingers shook as I pried it open. Inside were old photographs, faded and water-stained. My breath caught when I saw the first one. It was a wedding photo, but not mine. The bride looked almost exactly like me. And standing beside her was Mark. My Mark. Only the date scribbled on the back said 1998. I dropped the photo and stumbled back. My mind refused to accept what I was seeing. It couldn't be real. Mark would have been a child back then. But the face in the photo was him, no doubt about it. Same eyes, same smile, even the same scar on his chin from when he fell off his bike as a kid. But the date made no sense. I drove straight to Officer Daniels. I showed him the photos, my hands trembling so much that the papers rattled. He studied them quietly and then looked up at me with something like pity in his eyes. "You need to come with me," he said. He took me to a room filled with old case files. There were folders stacked everywhere. He pulled one from the bottom shelf and handed it to me. It was marked with a single name. Mark Harrison. My heart sank. He opened it, and there was another photograph inside. The same man, looking exactly the same, standing next to another bride. The date was 2009. Daniels rubbed his face and sighed. "We think he's been using different identities. Every few years, he shows up in a new town, engaged to someone who looks a lot like you. And every time, the woman disappears on her wedding day. We could never prove it was him. He was careful. No fingerprints, no evidence, just gone." My head was spinning. "You're saying he's a killer," I whispered. "That Mark, my Mark, isn't who he says he is." Daniels nodded slowly. "We don't know where he came from or how he does it. But you need to get somewhere safe." I went home and locked every door and window. I sat in the living room clutching a kitchen knife, my body shaking from exhaustion and fear. I didn't know what was real anymore. My fiancé, the man I was supposed to marry, could be a ghost from someone else's past. I thought about the lake, the hairpins, the voice on the phone. Everything pointed to him. But why would he do this? What did he want from me? That night, I dreamed I was walking down the aisle again. The church was empty. My dress was soaked, heavy with water. When I looked up, Mark was standing at the altar, but his face was wrong. Older, distorted, flickering like a broken film reel. I woke up screaming. At dawn, I decided to go through his things. I searched every drawer, every cabinet. In the garage, behind a stack of boxes, I found a locked trunk. The key was hidden behind a loose panel in the wall. Inside were more photos, wedding invitations, and rings. Dozens of rings. each one engraved with different initials. I recognized Claire's initials on one of them. I fell to my knees, tears blurring my vision. I wanted to throw everything into the fire, but I couldn't. I needed proof. I needed people to believe me. I took the rings and the photos to Daniels. He promised to get a search warrant for the lake area. That night, I didn't stay at my house. I checked into a small motel on the other side of town. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. But when I entered my room, there was something on the bed. A single white flower. The front desk clerk swore no one had been in my room since it was cleaned. I didn't sleep at all. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like footsteps. Every gust of wind outside felt like breathing against my ear. I kept seeing his face in the dark, smiling, patient, waiting. The next morning, I got a call from Daniels. His voice was tense. "We found something at the lake. You need to come." When I arrived, there were police cars everywhere. The lake was surrounded by yellow tape. Officers were pulling something from the water. A car, the same model as Mark's old one, the one he said he sold years ago. Inside they found a wedding dress, almost identical to mine. Daniels turned to me. "It was registered under his name," he said. "We're issuing a warrant for his arrest." But I knew it wouldn't be that easy. He was always one step ahead. And deep down, I knew he was still watching. Because that night, as I sat in the motel room staring at the door, my phone buzzed again. A message. No number. Just a single sentence. "You're next, Emily." After that message, I knew I couldn't stay another night in that motel. I packed my bag in silence, every sound amplified by fear. My hands were shaking as I shoved the last few things into the suitcase. I looked around the room one last time before leaving, and that's when I noticed something strange. The mirror above the dresser had a small crack running across it, and behind the crack, faintly written in red lipstick, were the words, "Till death do us part." I froze. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I ran out of that room, straight into my car, and drove until the road disappeared into endless trees. I didn't care where I was going, I just needed to be away from everything. The phone kept buzzing. Same unknown number, same short messages. One said, "You can't run from love." Another said, "You promised me forever." Each one made my blood run colder. By dawn, I found myself back near the lake. I hadn't planned to come here, but somehow my car led me there like I was being pulled. The fog rolled low over the water, thick and pale. I parked and sat there, staring at the surface, my reflection trembling in the mist. Then I saw it, a shadow moving near the trees, slowly stepping out of the fog. It was him, Mark, or whatever he really was. He looked exactly the same. Same suit he wore on our wedding day, not a wrinkle out of place, not a speck of dirt. He smiled at me, that same gentle smile that once made me fall in love, and said, "You shouldn't have run, Emily. You were supposed to stay." His voice was calm, but there was something hollow behind it. Something inhuman. I stepped back, clutching the small cross pendant around my neck. "Who are you?" I shouted. "What are you?" He tilted his head. "You know who I am. You said yes to me." I could barely breathe. "You're not real. You can't be real." He laughed softly. "I've been real for a long time, Emily. Longer than you can imagine. You think I just found you by chance? I've found you many times before. Every lifetime you say yes, and every lifetime you try to leave. But this time, I won't let you go." My knees went weak. Every lifetime. The other brides. The photos. It wasn't about murder. It was a cycle. A curse. I turned and ran, tripping over the roots and rocks, my lungs burning. I could hear his footsteps behind me, slow and steady, like he knew I couldn't escape. I reached the edge of the lake, the same spot where I found the box. The ground was soft, wet, pulling me down. I looked back. He was standing there, smiling, hands outstretched. "Come back to me, Emily." Like before, I grabbed a stone and threw it at him. It passed right through his body, like he was made of smoke. His form flickered, his face twisting, shifting through faces I recognized, Claire, other women, then back to me. My own face smiling at me. "You can't escape yourself," the voice said. You're part of this. I stumbled backward into the lake. The water was freezing, dragging me down. I tried to scream, but it filled my mouth, my throat. And then I saw it below me, dozens of white dresses floating in the darkness, faces staring up through the water. All the brides before me. All of them the same. When I opened my eyes again, I was lying on the shore. It was morning. The sun was rising over the trees. My clothes were dry, my hands clean. For a moment, I thought it had been a nightmare. But when I looked at my reflection in the water, I saw that my eyes weren't the same color anymore. They were his. I drove back to town in a daze. The roads were quiet, the world almost too normal. I went straight to the police station, but when I asked for Officer Daniels, the receptionist frowned. "There's no one here by that name," she said. "Hasn't been for years." I felt my stomach twist. I pulled out my phone to show her the messages, but the screen was blank. No call logs, no texts, no photos. Like nothing had ever happened. I walked out into the street, dazed, clutching the small locket that Claire's sister had given me. I opened it again, but the note inside had changed. Now it said, "Welcome home." That's when I saw him across the street. Mark. Or maybe not Mark. He was standing there in a suit, holding a bouquet of white flowers, smiling like it was the happiest day of his life. And then, just as I blinked, he was gone. I looked down at the ring on my finger. It wasn't mine. It was old, tarnished, engraved with 2 letters, M and E. That night, when I looked in the mirror, my reflection smiled back before I did. And in that moment, I realized the truth. I hadn't survived the wedding day. I was just the next bride who vanished. Somewhere, the lake was calling again. And this time, I wouldn't resist.